Hey.
Hello
Well,
and welcome to AIL TV. This evening we have got a very interesting program. And of course, as you guys know, this is the very end of Black History Month. Now, Sonja Camara from For You Two News Magazine is got a guest here. They are going to be discussing very, very interesting things. My favorite, which is business. Is that right, Sonja?
that's definitely business, Joseph. Thank you so much.
Good, 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 good. Now, I don't want to waste much of your time here. Let me hand you over to Sonja Camara, who will be telling you everything that you need to know about business. Sonja Camara, you are on.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Well, I don't know if I'm telling you everything you know about business because I think a lot of us know more than we actually give ourselves credit for. But today, it's the last day of Black History Month. And for you two TV show, we have got together a show called In the Black because when your bank account is in the black, you have funds, you have money. And I'm so pleased to have Rudi Page with me, a multiple entrepreneur, a community activist. When I say activist around business, worked with Dyke and Dryden as their sales and marketing gentleman for many years. And we are going to talk about recognition for Black business, how Black business works. And when we think about Black Lives Matter and the Black Pound, what does that really mean to the Black community? We're going to look at that. We're going to really start drilling down on some economics. And you can join us live, Facebook Live, using AILTV. Just tap in AILTV, Facebook Lives, and you can get hold of us and give us some comments. But first of all, let me introduce my guest, Mr. Rudi Page. Thank you so much for joining us, Rudi. So, how are you?
I'm well, Sonia, and it's great to be on your show. And in one sense, I'm pleased that this is the last show for Black History Month as it relates to. We've been on so many Zooms and lots of publicity this month. My business partner, Derek Clement, was on the Channel 4 program, Hair Power. So he was able to give the recognition to Winston Isaacs of Splinters, and we're no doubt we'll come to recognition in terms of the contribution that particularly the Windrush generation and their children have made to the economic life of this country. And then, of course, we're here tonight in particularly to talk about Dyke and Dryden, given that we're in North London, really.
We are in North London, and I always love when Joseph shows that clip of West Green Road because, as we know, Dyke and Dryden, the business was situated on West Green Road. When you think of West Green Road, we can think of so many Black businesses that were there. Not only Dyke and Dryden, we had Head Start bookshops. Most people don't actually know the West Indian World had a stint where it was based on West Green Road as well.
Absolutely, right opposite Head Start. And I can tell you a story later that brings in both those businesses as it relates to Dyke and Dryden and my journey, through the ages.
Okay, so now you've said the right thing. In fact, let's take me on the Dyke and Dryden business journey. Okay, because we all, not only were they entrepreneurs, but we have to give credit where credit's due. They're individuals who came we could actually class them as Windrush. They built a business, a Black business. They collaborated because you had three men at the head of the business. So that talks about cooperation, collaboration, and they went on to do some more than run a business. They were actually supporting other businesses with their products. But let me hear your story. How did you get the Dryden job? I've always wanted to ask you that. Who employed you?
Exactly. Great start. So first of all, Mr. Dyke and Mr. Dryden started in 1965. at 43A West Green Road, and Mr. Wade joined them in 1968, and so in fact started selling records before they moved into cosmetics, where they moved to 126A West Green Road, and that was Mrs. Robinson who really drove that. But my entrance to the Dyke and Dryden story, I arrived in 1981. So in fact, I had actually been introduced to Dyke and Dryden by Arif Ali, because for a couple of years before, when he was at Caribbean Times in Fonthill Road, Finsbury Park, and because I'd been working for an advertising and marketing company, and he told me about Dyke and Dryden, so I went along to to see what services our company could provide them, and that's when I really got to know Mr. Wade first of all, and then in 1981 I had finished a small contract for them, and Mr. Wade said that there was a potential of a role there, because one of the large manufacturing companies, black manufacturing companies from the States called M&M Products, Atlanta, were looking for a salesperson. And he said, would I be interested? And I said, yeah, I would be very interested, because by then I'd started to realize what Dyke and Dryden was as a black business. So you're now talking about me being around 21, 22 years old. And so to actually come into a black business with a large warehouse, that was at St. Louis Road off Seven Sisters Road in Tottenham. It was a great opportunity. And then once I was brought into the firm, then I never looked back in terms of the pride of being in a black business that was an integral part of what was going on, at the time.
Well, this is really interesting, because you've highlighted something to me which is really important, that an organization back in the 60s and 70s recognized that you needed sales and marketing. A lot of businesses don't really give enough credit to that role in the business. So, the fact they recognized that was a necessity to grow their business, I think.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Sonja. I'll tell you why, because we're now talking about the 1980s, early 80s. And remember, black guys could get arrested, and did get arrested during lunchtime, even in their suit and tie, because of the sus laws. So we always have to remember the context. So the context in the 80s of Dyke and Dryden and the success they had, you're talking quite a brutal time in terms of social, cultural, economic, when it came to people of the Windrush generation and their children. And much of that kind of history, is forgotten and not recognized by people, but for those of us who came up in that generation. So their appointment of myself at the time, so I was really the first sales and marketing person based here in the UK professionally, and there was one or two in terms of America. There was one other lady who was actually before me, but didn't really work here so much, and that was Nancy
and who
Ash.
Was that?
Nancy Ash. And Nancy worked for Summit Products, but she was more international than, up and down the high streets the way I was with Dyke and Dryden. So that role I played in terms of sales and marketing then encouraged the other companies to take on youngsters to be involved in selling and marketing and competing. And then, of course, we had our homegrown businesses like Mr. Bruce from Edmonton, and he had 3 or 4 salesmen
go on to
on
Mr.
the road.
Bruce. So let me just go back there. So Summit, was that a black owned business as well?
No, not at the time, but they had a black CEO who later became a partner. I think he may have been a partner in there already. And I'm trying to think of his name. I'm trying to think of his name. I can see his face.
Oh, okay. I just wondered. Okay, it's nice to have some background.
I hope he's not watching. He'd be upset that I can't remember his name, but it'll come to me at some point, because he was a good guy.
So,
based in Chicago.
Okay, so we've got Summit there, and then like you said, you've got
then you had Mr. Bruce. It's,
Bruce, yeah, also being representing these organisations. But really, I want to ask you, what about the hair industry? Obviously, we know it is a $1 billion industry right now,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
predominantly run by a lot of Asian individuals, the shops as
mm,
such, the factoring. But talk to me about the innovation, that
mm.
really got Dyke and Dryden, and we know they did records prior to really get them going as businessmen.
I think what really did it in terms of market power and playing that pivotal role in the 1980s is when the curly perm and the relaxers, particularly the curly perm and your hairsprays in terms of moisturizers, and that was working with particularly M&M products and Soft Sheen products, TCB, those brands. So it's really the 1980s where they came to the forefront. So up until then, there were other wholesalers that were ahead of Dyke and Dryden as such, but so it's that early 80s time which brought them that dominance over the next 10 to 15 years. So yeah, so it's definitely the curly perm. And then at the same time, there was a growth in salons as well, and retailers and
The
wholesalers
black
from our,
salons.
yes, yes. So and hairdressing schools as well. So you had a lot of entrepreneurs, literally thousands of entrepreneurs from our community, that generation, which had a blend of the Windrush generation and the children of the Windrush generation, all running their businesses. And there was a cultural pride also as it related to the community as well, because again you had this new generation wanting to showcase themselves. All the fashion shows used to talk about dress to impress, and so there was a strong cultural self-esteem and confidence despite the difficult environment. And then, of course, in the 80s, a lot more of us started to travel internationally. As I said, we're going to Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, New York, people like
New
myself
York.
and others, so we started to get that exposure. And then as that was happening, then more of the companies, and this always happens when the market's competitive. So more of the Black American companies and some of the other wider mainstream companies that had Black brands, then it was fierce competition because London was the European hub. So in those days, you didn't have a lot of transshipment direct from the US market into Africa or even into Europe. Everybody came
Mm.
to London. This was the place. So the Nigerians, the Ghanaian business people, a lot of women as well, would come to London, come to Dyke and Dryden. The people from Europe, from Holland in particular, and France, they would come to Dyke and Dryden, or of course they go to Brixton, place their orders, and so we'd get large orders from the other wholesalers and retailers. And we had a lot of,
So,
great retailers as well, like Martin's of Brixton. He was there for years.
okay. So you're talking about a network now. We're not just talking about manufacturing, we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about wholesale, we're talking about retail, and we're talking about independence. So I'm looking at that black pound actually staying within the community at one point. Because when you think
Yeah.
about the process you've just explained, that means that the pound, as in the income, we talk about how many bounces the income has in the community. What you just described means the economy, the money was actually staying within the community at one point.
It,
What
it,
do you
it,
think
it
about that?
was, yeah, because at one time, Dyke and Dryden was the largest supplier of trade credit to Caribbean businesses and the wider black businesses. So again, if you think of what that meant, so the largest amount of customers, the largest amount of trade credit, so that's a considerable amount of money flowing in and around the market. And those same people then were the largest trainer of young people and the largest promotional work in terms of photographers, photo shoots, fashion shows,
Stylists.
all the stylists, all the models, all those young people. So that, and then not only that, those same young people brought the brands as well.
Carry on.
Sorry, carry on, Rudi. So sorry.
Yeah.
Rudi, I'm so sorry about that. I thought it was on silent. Yeah, carry on. Because we're just
Yes.
talking
So,
the model
so
that
what we
stylists.
described there is the ecosystem. This is the thing that many people don't recognize, the contribution that was made to the economy of this country. Because also what's integral to that as well then, Sonja, is that Dyke and Dryden had two of their own brands. One was called Natural Beauty, the other was Super Curl. So
That
those
they've
products,
obviously done the patent. They've created the
yeah,
whole
yeah,
right.
yeah, they were big export uh, um, products. But the point I'm really underlying here, that because those products were made under private label, so, and one of the
Explain
main
that
factors,
just for some of our listeners. Just explain,
right?
because we're talking about the cosmetic industry, which is big business. So something like a
Yeah,
private label. Just give us a snapshot exactly what that means.
right. So what that means is that that you actually create your own brand. So, for example, like one of the leading brands now, Sheer Moist 9, for example, right? So we don't have a factory, but what we do, business partner Derek Clement, he's formulated the brand, and he has said to the manufacturer, "This is how I want this brand to feel for my clients." And then somebody else actually makes it, who has all of the machinery and all the standards, etc., that you have to meet, and then you put your product name on there. That's your brand. And in fact, we need more of our community to do that, because it's brands that drive the economy. And what
Ownership there
we
as well, isn't it?
and
Innovation.
it's about ownership, it's about innovation, it's about utilizing the means of communication. One of the challenges that our community has at the moment is that we're not using digital innovation and digital tools to collaborate, create back brands that go across sectors. And that's what we did back in those days. So what we did successfully was link fashion, music, hair products, shops as one ecosystem of collaborative businesses.
Lifestyle. It's the whole lifestyle.
Absolutely lifestyle. Because the magazine, so if you think of
Yeah.
Root magazine best actually symbolizes that. And then say West Indian World, Caribbean Times symbolize the news and that more deeper content, which gave you the social, cultural, economic context of the time.
So what you've just explained to me is more than innovation. It's innovation, aspiration, and everything else, but it's a shared experience because we don't have one person building this. We have a team. And I think the
It,
team building is something we don't give ourselves, I think, in our community enough credit about, because the team building is really important. But I wanted to ask you, Rudi, across the pond, when Dyke and Dryden had an opportunity to work with a major manufacturer in the USA, was that a black business as well?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And the answer is yes. And that really came about in 1982. So Dyke and Dryden organized the first ever trade mission from this country of black businesses. And there's
Amazing.
about 40 businesses who are manufacturers,
40.
retailers, hairdressers. About 40 of us left here July 1982 and went to Atlanta to the Bronner Brothers show. And the reason was that Mr. Dyke said that in order for us as black business people in this sector to be taken seriously, we needed to have our own show, our own show that had the manufacturers and the retailers, the wholesalers, the hairdressers. And also, from my perspective as a sales and marketing manager, it was also a tool to control our brands and to compete against the other brands as well by creating our own showcase. And that's where we learned about how you link music, fashion, promotion, all in one tight arena. It's from the Bronner Brothers show. So when I came back here and came up with the line, the title Afro Hair and Beauty. So that
Wow.
model of that layout it was just what I learned from watching the experts in Atlanta. And so M&M products was really, again, an integral part, then later soft sheen products. So M&M were from Atlanta, soft sheen were from Chicago. So they, in those early days, they were pivotal in terms of being able to generate that high level of income that could be then driven for promotions, employ people, because obviously Dyke and Dryden had shops, had over 50 staff, warehouses and things like that. And it was an integral part of the industry.
That's amazing. So they're market leaders, not only in the UK, but they're obviously making their way through collaboration in the US, and they're supporting Black businesses in the UK, trade credit,
right.
also building up skill sets with people. They're collaborating, they're cooperating, they're expanding, they're doing all of that. So when we think about their contribution,
can I add something to
how
that
many people
before you? Yeah, could I add something before you? Can I just add something before you go on to the next point, Sonja?
Yeah, of course
you raised a good point, because I mentioned about the importance of hairdressers and professional hairdressing and the skills that many young people, thousands of young people learn. So you're talking about, at the top of that was Winston Isaac Splinters. So they were in fact Dyke and Dryden's largest customer in terms of hairdressing
salons. And I think you need to let our customers know where Splinters was. You know, you got to the location of the shop and all that, because that is very important.
Maddox Street in Mayfair, again, to have a salon of that size from our community. Winston came from Guyana. Again, he trained thousands of people. Derek Clement was the first, one of the first artistic directors, one of the first proteges out of that. But also, of course, in North London, we had Joan Sam's Supreme Hairdressing.
Yes.
Which again, worked very closely with the Dyke and Dryden family.
And was also on West Green Road.
Again, absolutely on West Green Road and Turnpike Lane as well, where they had a school. Really important, because they turned out, you know, lots of young people, which is an integral part. And the other important thing in terms of, like I was going to say as well, there was a body called the Caribbean and Afro Society of Hairdressers. So Dyke and Dryden arranged for their first meeting to be held in their warehouse at St. Louis Road of Seven Sisters Road. So again, they understood that collaboration is important, and that's why I still use that word, collaboration is great, or 3 words, right up to today, because again, they help to galvanize the industry and the community, the culture, and express those values of collaboration. Mr. Dryden always used to say to us, we're only here planting seeds. That's what he used to say all the time. We're just planting seeds. Yeah.
So Rudi, let me ask you a question now. Let me take you back to the early 80s or jet setting about. Give me a snapshot of what your day consisted of. So you get up, you're going into work. Tell me, just give me an idea of your day. I really would like to know.
In those days, I had hair, right?
I've seen you.
You've never seen me in real life with hair, but I did have hair. And funny enough, my hair used to be natural, just sort of pretty close crop, natural. Used to keep it low because I used to, you know, that was my style. But then somebody said to me, in fact, one of the American guys said to me, Rudi Page, you're selling curly perms. You need to have a curly perm, man. So you see that.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the only reason why I had a curly perm. Because
thank you for that, Joseph. That's brilliant.
But
tell me your day. Come on, tell me what your day looks like. I'm fascinated.
Right. So if show my commitment in terms of Dyke and Dryden. So in those days, I lived in Reading. So I regard myself as a Slough man. So lots of my family and friends from that growing up, they will know me from Slough. They know me as a Slough man. I moved to Reading, and I used to drive from Reading to Tottenham every day and back. And in those days, Sonja, I had to be on the motorway at 5:45 in the morning in order to get to Dyke and Dryden for 9 o'clock. And I would always be one of the first people to arrive. So when Mr. Dyke came to open up, I would be there sitting in the car waiting for them. And he always recognized that in me, that I actually, would get there in time for work, even though I lived so far away. And it was, in those days, from Reading was a difficult journey. So in terms of, so I would have a program, and I would just map out which part of London I would be working in, whether I'd be working in, west, south, east, whatever. And then I would just have a rota where I'd visit retailers. And in those days as well, Dyke and Dryden held the Selfridges account. So I would visit Selfridges.
The Selfridges account?
Yeah, and that was important. So in the early 80s then, we still had a lot of work to do in terms of distribution and getting the products into a wider market. So many people won't remember, but that old group of retailers called chemists, as they were called then, they dominated the retail sales because what were called drugstores couldn't really sell those products until the law was changed that allowed them to actually sell more. So there was a tight control. So there was a tight control on the who wholesale the products, and then of course there was a tight control in terms of the retail. And then with Mr. Wade, I supported Mr. Wade in those days, given that he was the director, company secretary, and I was the sales manager, to get the products into Boots. And at the time that was a major thing. And in fact, I remember in one of the negotiations, I missed that particular meeting where Boots kind of said, you can have I think 15 stores in London, but you have to deliver the products to each store yourselves, and then you go into the stores and speak to the managers and tell them about the products. And I remember saying to Mr. Wade that's strange that why should we be having to deliver to each of the stores individually? So the next meeting we went to, and when everything was finalized, we were just leaving. And as we were walking out the door, I turned round to the management team and I said, well, why can't we deliver to the central warehouse in Nottingham like everybody else? And then one of the senior managers says, we don't see why not. That's okay. And with that actually boosted up the size of the order, because once you're delivering to the central warehouse, you're talking about pallets of products.
Yes.
Whereas if you're delivering to individual stores, as you can imagine, they've only got
handbag.
Exactly. So that really gave a boost and to the business in terms of the perception of the products in the mainstream. Because again, as people were becoming more affluent and aware, people not everybody wanted to go to Brixton Market or Shepherd's Bush Market to buy their products.
Or Ridley Road.
Ridley Road. So again, in order to drive the sales up, and of course, this is where it becomes a double-edged sword, because once you start to drive the wider retail market, and as I mentioned about the drugstores, you then have that reduces the sales within the very same community from which you come from as well, in terms of the competitiveness. So for a while it didn't matter, but there's a point where you get to a kind of market saturation. And then of course it's about price then and buying power.
Yes.
And that's
obviously just, would then have to be, you'd have to then consider new lines. Like you said, your price point change. You're going to be looking for new areas for distribution, and you're going to be looking for new product lines as well, aren't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And at a time where things are getting extremely competitive, lots of sales reps around by that time, and I'd left Dyke and Dryden by 1984. I was doing my own thing for the next few years as well. So there was a lot of changes later on, especially
That's
near
really
the
good.
late 80s and early
Early.
90s.
I'm sorry. So, Rudi, let's talk about. I mean, listeners, if you're there, watch viewers, you can log on to Facebook, AAL TV, and you can post a question. Talk to us about black business. We want to hear about In the Black. We want to hear about your business. If you're from a magazine, anything to do with lifestyle, what Rudi Page has just been describing, we want to hear your story. Especially if you had a brand in the 80s and the 90s. We want to have a little bit of reminiscing for this day,
Especially her computer is
Black
not
History Month.
really.
So, Rudi, I wanted to ask you, you've just really given us a fantastic background, you more than a snapshot of what things were like. And we can see that obviously these individuals were dedicated to doing business within their community. So, what does the black pound look like for you now, as in when we're talking about black business? What do you think?
But the reality,
Yeah.
the reality is that we're getting a lot of announcements, I've noticed, and a lot of social media posts, but I would like to see some real substance personally to those posts. So evidence that there is that level of collaboration, there is a commitment to training young people, and that that we're promoting brands that we create, that we're using them, and that we're using sales channels that involve our communities. So there's no reason why we can't be buyers and sellers to ourselves of products and services. And then most importantly, there are plans in place for training the next generation. And all those things we do within our business network. So that's what I would like to see and hear more of and see the evidence of.
But how would we evidence that? Because here you have three individuals came to the UK from the Windrush. Probably a lot of them didn't come from, you know, brilliant means and monetary,
Yeah,
but obviously they
humble origin. They were all came from humble origins. Yeah, absolutely.
right. They all came from humble origins. Exactly right. They came from humble, but they had a desire, the will, and decided to collaborate to make something, magnificent. Not only making money. Talking about employing people, you're talking about training people,
Exactly.
and you've already mentioned the knock-on effect with that, where that means individuals in the community don't have to worry about looking for a job as such because somebody can
Exactly.
offer you some form of employment. Now, right now,
Exactly.
we have
Yeah.
situation in the community where there's still people, we're still having to knock on doors to get a job, still
Yeah.
have to
No,
knock on
absolutely.
training, still have to knock on a bit harder on to get support from, lenders. And I'm just
Yeah.
wondering whether or not, in some ways, not that we've gone backwards, but we don't seem to have moved very much further.
Right. That's a really good point, Sonia. And this is the conundrum that we face here in the UK. Right. So first of all, when Dyke and Dryden first hit £1 million turnover,
What
they
year was
could not
that?
get an. So I was still there at the time. So that would have been sometime up to 1984 when I
My
left Dyke.
word.
And at the
That's
time, with £1 million
that's incredible.
turnover, so you can imagine how much £1 million would be worth now. But they were not able to get an overdraft from the bank for £5,000 because they were still
And the
considered a
turnover's a
risk.
million pounds.
Yeah, so that tells you the pressure that that our community was under. And I can tell you a side story to that. That in my days with Business Link, this would be in around 2000, the Bank of England published a report around the financing of African Caribbean businesses. And I remember I can remember the name of the author, but I won't say his name. But all I will say is that in the report, it said that there's a perception of discrimination when it comes to finance or financing of African Caribbean businesses. Because obviously in those days, the generations of black businesses were primarily African Caribbean people, as opposed to now where you have a mix of African and Caribbean. But and so and at a business link meeting, I challenged him and said, actually, and I told the story of Dyke and Dryden. So I was able to say, well, a few years ago from now, so that would have been the year 2000. So 1984 was still clear in my mind in terms of what we did in those days. And I told the story about Dyke and Dryden. And then he had to admit that, he said, yeah, we just put this report together. And that led to the British Bankers Association at the time, who had a member of staff there to initiate a program, a research program, as it related to the financing of African Caribbean businesses, what was actually going on. I mean, the report was okay, but it wasn't great, because institutionally, there's still kind of a reluctance to really be very clear that having suffered from discrimination over a period of time, then what then should be put in place is a real clear business support program financing, with fair financing. But you got some of that with Business Link under a program, and you might remember Access to Finance.
Yes, I do remember Access to Finance.
Advisor, and if you had the business advisor and support, they could go to the bank with you, and you would, get.
I actually did use that service.
Yeah, you had North London Business Development Agency, which Mr. Wade was one of the founders of, and they were good. So there were some interventions, but of course, those interventions don't last long. It's never quite enough. And of course, at the end of the day, the way the market works, the market is a very competitive place. So, and at different points, you need assistance. Doesn't matter who you are, or how good you are as an entrepreneur, because you can be a great with 10 people to 100 people. But what happens if you're 100 and you need 200 or 300 people? The kind of support you need.
Or you're one and you need 2. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it doesn't exist. That's the reality, and I've yet to be convinced. And if it's out there and I haven't seen it, it would be great for people to come and show us in public, so that they can get the recognition and explain to us how they have got over those barriers.
Yeah, and I think that you really raise an interesting point. And I think at this point, I would really like to honour Basil Lewis, who sadly passed away here, who came as same sort of generation, I'm sure, as Mr. Wade.
They're good friends, in fact. Mr. Basil Lewis, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Wade lived on the same street in Jamaica, so I met him a number of times. Okay. And they tell you great stories, from Turnpike Lane, and the kind of things they had to do and what they went through as well, structurally. Yeah.
But I think we have to give credit, because obviously Basil Lewis, with some other individuals, was the founder of the credit union movement in the UK, and he's actually honoured for that to this day. So prior to that, Britain did not have, they had mutual companies, but they never really had a credit union, which is something that is more synonymous with the Caribbean and even Africa. So where it comes to trying to get money, financial support, there we have someone who set up something because they know the need was there for the community. So what are we?
And I was going to add to that.
As a community, Rudi, what do we need to do right now? Because we know we have COVID-19. I don't think we can ignore that. All businesses have got some sort of financial trouble. If they haven't got some financial trouble, they can't operate because of COVID. They've been interrupted. Business has been interrupted. But what benefit can that be to Black businesses? And I say that because an opening program, we recently did an interview with a Black business literally, I think next door to where Dyke and Dryden business started originally, the Tree of Eternal Life, where somebody has opened a new business right smack bang in the middle of lockdown. So you still have individuals, entrepreneurs, still doing positive things. But what can we do on a systematic
Yeah.
operation? What can we do in the community to really get business, employment, training going?
Yeah, there's a few points in there, Sonia. Just going slightly back on what you were saying about Basil Lewis and that generation, is that they were willing to collaborate and pool their resources, either through cooperative working or, as you said, the credit union. I mean, in modern day,
Partner.
and of course, they had partners as well, which was a significant finance of housing and businesses, houses and businesses. But in this modern day, we talk about pooling resources and sharing revenues. But you, there's not a lot of individuals who will do that. But so I see that as one of the areas for us to be thinking about is to collaborate within ourselves. And I touched on earlier on that we must make products and services and use them ourselves, sell them, and train the next generation. You know, it's as simple as that, really. It's not any rocket science. So some of it is definitely about behavior change within ourselves as well. And so there's nothing really new to be said other than to build collaboration, trust, and confidence within ourselves. And your point about COVID is so true as well, that if you think about what COVID has done, it has first of all, it uncovered fragmentation in terms of collaboration or collaborative leadership, the management of systems or lack of systems. It uncovered that.
Gents,
It
we have
also
got
has
4
created a
minutes.
market opportunity.
4
Okay.
minutes.
Okay.
It created opportunity in that it closed down a lot of the retail or most of the retail operations, which meant that those of us who put our products and services online now had
Yes.
a greater opportunity to reach the
Yeah.
consumer, i.e. ourselves. So some of our brands have benefited from that, and many brands have benefited from being online. And obviously, we know the household names. I don't need to mention them. So the use of technology and digital tools are important. The whole
That's right.
diaspora movement. So we need entrepreneurs now to be more outward looking and think of international trade. And then in our local communities and neighborhoods, there's still a demand for services, goods and services,
Yes.
products and services. So we just need to create more. We need more women in business, definitely,
Yes.
especially that age group between 40 and 60 age group, where again, the evidence shows that that age group, you know, there's great potential for them. So again,
Lived
that leads to
experience and
having
everything
more.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they've lived the experience. So what we actually need then, we need more business support services, which we know that we don't have that kind of support in the terms of the local economy anymore. But some of that can be done through experienced business people collaborating and working with that generation of people who would like to get into business but don't know how. So the collaboration is increasing the internal collaboration, and that certainly would generate revenue and income
Revenue.
to be
Yeah.
shared around
And
the community.
employment.
Yeah,
Okay.
and employment and the skills that go with that.
Okay. I've got a slight delay here, but Rudi, we're just about to come to the end. Can you believe it? It's gone so quickly. 45 minutes
1
time's
hour.
gone. Yes. I'm
That could
afraid
be
to say.
part two.
Yeah, we're going to have to. But I really want to thank you because what you've done, you've given us a snapshot of something that's evidence based. And I think
Yeah,
why we wanted to do Black History Month is we forget actually that this is not nothing new to us. We have got real examples in our community that we just need to remember, remember
yes,
their contribution really, and the work that you're doing and through making connections work is invaluable. But
yeah.
I do want to thank you for being our special guest on For You Too today, honouring and
Thank you.
celebrating History Month, and we will have a part 2 because we want to talk more about the Black Pound, whatever that is. How does that really work? Another thing we want to talk about, Rudi, we want to talk about employment and business enterprise. So we're going to do a whole show around.
Time is out. Time out.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will be in touch.
Ask Rudi. Yes, I think it would be a good idea if you ask Rudi to come back again and talk about these issues, because really what I see and what I feel in my mind, there is so much to discuss and there are so many issues to troubleshoot. So you can't do it in one program. Rudi, come back again, man.
Okay, then we'll do that. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll have you back, Rudi. Joseph, thank you very much. Viewers, thank you very much for being part of the For You 2 show. Log on AIL TV, making connections work. But most important, take care, and we will be in touch very soon. Bye-bye.
Yes. So, and sorry to cut you, like, I work like a military man. So if time is time, we have to finish.
That's okay.
Yes. You see, our
it went very quickly.
We need to train ourselves. We need to create our policies and follow them. Don't be late.
No, it's just
and don't go out late.
No.
So, as always, you have been you have been listening or watching to Sonja Camara and Rudi Page. These guys know their stuff. If you want to know anything about business, and the good thing is that they are hiring a residents. So they know everything about hiring a, yes, I must say so. Now, I know Sonja Camara we will be back with another exciting program again. So until then, ciao.
Happy Black History Month.